They're saying, I'm going to cut people's essential care to give tax breaks to billionaires. And we're going to say, no, we're going to tax billionaire corporations that avoid paying taxes in order to protect the care of the people of our state.
Hello, my name is Ryan Oates with Progressive Mass. Massachusetts loses hundreds of millions of dollars in taxes to offshore corporate tax dodging. This is money that could be used to support families or communities in Massachusetts, but instead, billionaire corporations like Apple, Amazon, McDonald's, and Walmart hide their profits overseas in order to avoid paying Massachusetts taxes. Today, we're going to talk about a bill in the Massachusetts State House to address that problem, an act combating offshore tax avoidance. Before we get into the details of this bill, I wanted to start by defining the problem that it aims to solve. In order to do that, I spoke with two people. First, Harris Gruman, the executive director of the SEIU Massachusetts State Council. I also spoke with Dr. Phineas Baxandall, the policy director of the Massachusetts Budget and Policy Center. And the first question I asked them was, when we're talking about taxes on corporations, what is offshore tax avoidance?
I think almost everybody knows, and it's sort of interesting that they do. I mean, we've polled on it, and 84% of people are like, yeah, that shouldn't be the way it is. And they know it is the way it is, which is that a very small percentage of businesses basically have subsidiaries all around the world. And of course, they particularly put them where taxes are low. And then what they do is they take money basically they made in Massachusetts or in some other state of the United States, and then say, actually, it was made by this subsidiary in the Cayman Islands or in Liechtenstein or something, which is often the size of a P.O. box,
Sometimes they might have, just a mailbox located in some building in the Cayman Islands, but through their accounting tricks, they can make it seem as if most of their money is being earned in the Cayman Islands. So then when it comes to actually issuing taxes, they say, sorry, our profits weren't earned here in Massachusetts. They weren't earned in the Cayman Islands. And these schemes both kind of rob the federal government and also the states, including the Commonwealth here in Massachusetts, of taxes that we should be receiving.
So how much revenue exactly is the state of Massachusetts losing?
We lose hundreds of millions of dollars in Massachusetts alone every year.
We know it's in the hundreds of millions of dollars, and there's some dispute about exactly how many hundreds of millions.
Not only are we losing out on tax revenue that we could use to support families and communities in Massachusetts, but this practice also creates an unlevel playing field for small businesses.
And why this is a question of fairness, aside from the obvious, maybe these are billionaire multinational corporations, is that 90% of the businesses in Massachusetts are locally owned or, domestic, U.S. businesses. And they can't take advantage of this.
It's really important for us to realize that small businesses, as an overwhelming rule, do not have offshore subsidiaries. It's not a small business if they've got a Cayman Island subsidiary. For small businesses right now, they have to compete on a very unlevel playing field. If you're the local coffee shop and you're competing against Starbucks has all these mechanisms that they're not having to pay their full share of tax, and you do. So that sort of sets you at an unfair advantage.
So that means not only are they competing against global macro corporations, and you know what Amazon does to our local retailers, or what McDonald's does to our local mom and pop diners, right? They also have to pay a higher tax rate than those folks do because they pay their taxes, and these folks don't. So we're leveling the playing field between the 99% of businesses and the 1% who are taking advantage of us.
So now that we've outlined the problems with offshore tax avoidance, let's talk about how to fix it. This bill is titled An Act Combating Offshore Tax Avoidance, and here's how it works.
So the idea is to tax the profits from Massachusetts that are being registered as offshore.
And what it does is it identifies profits that are being shifted to at least the most notorious tax havens, and then taxes a portion of those shifted profits. So these shifted profits are called global intangible low tax income, because they're income that is being being claimed to have been earned in overseas places with very low tax rates.
Global, because these are people with global subsidiaries. Intangible, because it's offshore, so it's hard to measure it or know exactly what it is. Low taxed, because it's being put into places with very low taxes, maybe no taxes. and income, meaning it's something that should be taxed because it's profits. If it was in Massachusetts, we'd be taxed at 8% corporate tax rate.
This global intangible low tax income is known as GILTI, um, and it's a great acronym. But unlike most New England and most other mid-Atlantic states, Massachusetts doesn't follow what the federal practice is, which is to tax 50% of that designated GILTI income. To say not a 50% tax rate, but to say that half of that GILTI income is subject to whatever the tax rate is.
And we're surrounded by states that do, like Maine, New Hampshire, the famous not pro-tax state, Vermont, Rhode Island, a lot of mid-Atlantic states and states around the country who do this, and they're telling us we're getting a lot of revenue from this, more than we even thought we would.
And in Massachusetts, we currently only tax 5% of that GILTI income. So we're only getting 1/10 of what we should be getting from this income. And so adopting the federal approach would be what would bring us those extra hundreds of millions of additional revenue.
So now that we have a basic understanding of what this bill does, let's focus on how people can support it.
Well, you should know who your state legislators are. I mean, your state representative and your state senator, because we need all of them as possible to co-sponsor the bill. That sends a message up to the leadership that, the votes are there. We currently have 68 co-sponsors, which is a third of the legislature. Ideally, and that's very good, actually, but ideally we can get to half. We have done that before. Once you have half the legislature, you're basically saying, here's your vote count.
If you want to know if your legislator has co-sponsored this bill, you can go to scorecard.progressivemass.com. On there, you can find your legislator and find out if they've co-sponsored. I'll also put the link to find your legislator's contact information below. But once you've taken that first step, what else can you do?
You can take it to the next step, too, which is to meet with your legislator. Even get together with a few other people, either from Progressive Mass or from like SEIU, my union, or from wherever. To go, 5 or 10 people go meet with the legislator in a cafe or, in their local office or whatever it is, and tell them why this is so important. I mean, what we're struggling with, like you said, special ed in the schools, or getting care for substance use, or having health insurance you can afford, or a hospital that you can access, and why we're threatened by these things. Well, they should do all the things locally they can. I mean, one thing is letters to the editor, like monitor what's being said on the radio and the press, and engage with that and say to people, this is what it is. And so learn enough about it that you feel confident. Although I always say, you don't have to know everything. You have to know what's at stake. You have to know what the basic values are. That's why, like you said, that the tagline is right there, right? They want to cut care to provide tax breaks to billionaires. We want to tax billionaire tax avoiders to provide care. Like I said, if you're involved in an organization like Progressive Mass or your union or, your church social justice group or whatever, you just keep, you talk to your legislators, then you have a meeting with them, then you go to the State House or you go to a rally or you're among others, we're all together. It's the way to join what we're calling the resistance, right? I mean, the resistance to unfortunate, terrible things that have happened.
Harris also recommended checking out the campaign's website. There, you can sign up for updates about the campaign. If you want to get in contact with the campaign directly, you can email info@raiseupma.org. Thank you so much for watching. I think this bill will help to create a more fair tax system, and it'll also help us to actually fund a government that actually works for people. So thank you so much.